Alright, welcome to the second video, sort of tips and tricks video concerning the new side loader version 3, which has just been released. And we're going to have a look this time at integration of the Ultimate 1MB with the side cartridge. So what we've done here on this machine, we've got the new Ultimate BIOS. We've gone ahead and enabled Sparta-DOS-X, which is kind of immaterial for the purposes of this demonstration, most of it at least. But more importantly, we've enabled our PBI BIOS and our hard disk. Now, something worth pointing out is that the PBI BIOS on its own does not interfere with cartridge operation, and it doesn't cause the side 2 to act in unison with the Ultimate board. What does that specifically is the hard disk setting. If we just leave the PBI BIOS enabled and perhaps the high-speed SIO acceleration here, the machine still behaves basically like a stock machine, but with a PBI based high-speed SIO driver. It's specifically enabling the hard disk that causes the system to look for the side 2 cartridge, and that's what's going to mess up various flash cartridges if you have the wrong cartridge plugged in at the time. So that's what we do here. We've got these boot drive set to D1. Now that's only used when Sparta-DOS-X is turned off, and of course the loader in fact overrides that setting anyway. It overrides both of these settings. So now we've got this stuff turned on, we don't use the loader that's on the cartridge anymore. And there's really no reason to do it. If you're using the loader that's on the cartridge when you've got things set up this way, you're doing something wrong. We always access the loader, make sure I've saved everything here, with the L key from the BIOS. And I'm just going to check actually that I've got the swap button enabled. So the swap button enabled here causes the ROM on the side cartridge to be, it's gone anyway, it's never used. You can, in this new BIOS, this new firmware, turn this off and enable the ROM on the cartridge at the same time as using the PBI hard disk. There's a reason for that, because we can use the flash ROM on the side cartridge for other things, including OSS cartridges like Action Max 65, which Eric Backer kindly patched up for us. But other than that, you're going to turn the swap button on. That gives you the disk image flipping functionality, and causes the ROM to be persistently turned off. So we'll save that again, go into the loader. Now the loader, because it's got the PBI BIOS to hand, we've got the mount points for the partitions on the card. This was previously grayed out. This is always grayed out on the standalone loader with the when you're not on an Ultimate machine with the PBI BIOS. So rather than just having XEX files and ROM files and basic files loaded, listed now in the loader, we've got a whole load more stuff. We've got disk images, which have suddenly showed up, and this allows us to demonstrate the search facility that I went into a little bit in the last video, because there's a lot more ATR files on this card than there are XEX files. So I'm going to search for all the ATR files on the disk. Conveniently, there aren't more than 250 on this card, so you can see it finds them all. We could look for Yump, I suppose. and it'll find them all. We've got stuff at the end of the card. There is another card, I think, with more stuff on it. If I can find it. Maybe. Of course, we can swap cards at any time here. I'm going to pop the card out here and pop this one in. Just want to see what's on it. What's this one here? This is a huge archive of stuff here downloaded from AtariOnline.pl or org, I forget which. This has got, I think there's about 5,000 folders on this volume. And I used to, I think when I was testing, I used to search for Groot, which is way down at the back of the disc. So you can see it's scanning through the files there trying to find Groot. It's going to take a while, but as you can see, it processes folders pretty quickly. I think it'll find this file in about 3 minutes or so. I'm not quite sure. So if we look for it, we actually look for a file somewhere here to see if we can use the search facility to find it. Quest for power. Let's look for the quest. Let's just type quest and see how long it takes to get. Oh, here we go. But there's so many folders on this disk, it's going to take a while for it to process them all. Just an enormous amount of stuff. What we can do, of course, if we want to drill down a little bit further, and we know roughly that we're in the Q directory, we can't remember where stuff is. This is going to dramatically, actually logging a lower directory. Obviously it cut down significantly the amount of time we spent looking for stuff here. We've got all the files and folders with Quest in them. I think there's a Terminator title on here, so if we log this one first, now this is another interesting point. This loader can handle folders with more than 250 entries in them. Now we get this little ellipsis at the top of the listing here. If we hit this, we get the second chunk of up to 250 entries. I don't think there are that many here, so this is chunk 2 of this folder, and if we hit that again, we're back to the first chunk. So there's about 400 files here, and we can switch between them by just hitting that ellipsis at the top there, which only appears when there are more files than will actually fit in the buffer. You can also hit Control M to do the exact same thing. So there we go, easy ways to access more than 250 files. Anyway, I'm going to swap the cards again because this is just such an unmanageably huge number of entries. We'll put our regular testing card in here, log the games folder again. So of course now we get the chance to mount disk images. Let's try this. So we can run this just by hitting the enter key, and this will boot the ATR. So now we've booted into DOS 2.5. Directory listing. I don't know what I called this file. Star.exe. There we go. So we'll load that. Now you can see we've got the I/O noise turned on for this, so this isn't loading from, that isn't serial I/O noise, that is simulated I/O noise applied to the disk image hosted on the FAT partition. So there we go, we've got that. We get out of this, and if we go back into the loader, we should see that this disk image is still mounted here. We've got the name of it here because it picked the name up as it was cataloguing this folder. We can go straight to it with Control F if we want to look up where the image is. It's taking us straight there. This works if the file is in a subfolder as well. So let's mount this 2-disk set here. We're using the tab key, and it tries to predict which drive number you're going to use next. So I press tab and it came up with drive 2. I'm going to press enter. I'm happy with that. So we can now go back here. There's our 2 disk images that we just mounted here. If we now we can manually press Ctrl R to reboot the system, and it'll boot from the first disk. And if we continue to go through this demo, at some point it's going to require disk 2, at which point we can press the button here and it will swap the images over, because we haven't done that yet here. Now if we go back into the loader, so we can see our drive letters still there, and it picked the names up. Now if we go back to the root folder, go back straight to the top here, and then we come back into the loader again, it didn't pick the names of the disk images up because it didn't log that directory. At the moment it doesn't know what the names of those files are because they're not recorded anywhere inside of the ultimate 1 megabyte memory. There just isn't room. But we can still, if we see that there's 2 disk images here and we want to go straight to the folder that contains them, we can press Ctrl F and it'll look up. There we go, it scanned the FAT volume and it showed us that they are in this folder, and if we go back here, it's now picked the names up here. They've been populated in the list. Now if we unmount everything with Ctrl U, really what that does is reread the partition table. So you'll still see hard disk partitions which are recorded in the partition table, but it gets rid of any disk images that you've put on there. Now if we look at this file here, this is a map file, so rather than having to manually tag these 2 disk images here, we can write a map file. It shows you how to do that in the manual. It's quite straightforward. It's just you can make the file as plain text file on the PC. It just has to be the drive number that you want the image mounted on, followed by the file name. And you just list them on separate lines, and that's your map file. Now if we press enter on this, it will, well, firstly we can suppress rebooting if you just want to mount these 2 files that are described in the map file without doing a reboot. We can press shift and enter, and it's mounted those 2 files. And these files now, as of this version of the loader, they don't even need to be in the same folder, because you can have path names, directory names in your map file. So they are now mounted on those drive numbers. Let's get rid of this again. But typically what you'd probably do is you just hit enter. Oh. Right, now if we look at this file here, this is a map file, and this is a little script that you can use to avoid having to individually tag 2 or more disk images. All the map file is a plain text file. You can make it on the PC or you can make it on the Atari. It doesn't really matter. Both line break characters are understood. and it's just the drive number has to have the digit, the path and file name. So these map files don't even have to be in the same folder as the target disk images. So drive number, path and file name with the extension, and as soon as you hit this map file, it mounts both images and boots the system. And then when you need to do a disk swap, obviously you can hit the button. So that's probably not the best example, of course, because it takes a while to get to the second disk. I think we've got the good old Packerman Terrace. There we are, there's a map file, Packerman Terrace. So if we hit that, it mounts both images. Start. Press the button, press enter. So that pressing the button swapped, redirected D1 to the second image and vice versa. So there we go. Handy shortcut we've got here is we hold down the L key and press reset, and we go straight back to the loader. That's another new feature of version 3 of the firmware. So L plus reset takes you back to the internal loader. It's kind of a substitute for the standalone loader where you can press the button and then reset the machine. But anyway, going back to these map files, you can also suppress the reboot, so you can action the map file without rebooting the machine by holding on the shift key, press enter rather. So shift and enter mounts those two volumes as per the content of the map file. And you see they're mounted there, so you can go ahead and do other things if you want to mount different images, etc. And in the logical drives menu, the default action is unmount, so you press enter and unmounts them. So that's map files. So yes, they don't need to be in the same folder anymore. Other things worth mentioning are meta tags, which are probably overlooked quite a lot. We've got some test files here. Now meta tags, there's two different ones. There's basic and SDX. I think I've got a couple of test files here. I thought I did. Perhaps not. Have I got anything with basic? Well, this is an ATR, so basic is disabled here by default, but this will override it on a one-off basis. Hopefully it will work. So I'm assuming if we, well, basic is enabled anyway. It crashed, but basic was enabled. I don't know anything about the games on that volume, but so yeah, if you've got the, let's bring that example up again. The basic meta tag will enable basic when you turn on that, when you run that image. You can also have that tag in XEX files as well, which will enable basic on a one-off basis. Similarly, if you have SDX within those square brackets, that'll turn on Sparta-DOS-X when you reboot the machine. Now regarding disk images in general, I did mention that there's more than one FAT volume on here. You can mount disk images from up to 4 different FAT volumes at any one time. Now you might notice this little digit that crops up here. That is the host volume number. So when you mount ATRs from this particular volume, assuming that's the first one that you mounted ATRs from, it registers that FAT volume, and that is the same number that you'll see here. For regular partitions, you'll see the partition sequence number for the disk. That's a totally different thing, but you can see which host a given disk image is mounted on by looking at if we mount something from a different volume, it will illustrate the point better. So let's just mount this one on drive 2. So now we've got 2 there. So this one belongs to the fat host number 1. This one belongs to fat host volume number 2, and hence we've got the numbers there. So if you were to mount disk images from test 2 and test 1, you'd get 3 and 4 then. And they get cleared when you refresh the partition table as well. So if we, for example, went Control U to reread the partition table, all of the fat hosts are cleared again. So if we were then to go in here and mount the same image on drive 1, test 3 becomes the first registered fat host volume. So if we were to go into test 3 and mount this one on drive 1, for example, then test 3 would become the first registered fat host volume, and so on and so forth. So that probably covers everything for the moment. I hope you enjoy the new firmware. It's taken quite a while to get it just right, hopefully, and I'm quite pleased with it. So yeah, I hope you found this useful. Maybe it revealed a couple of things that you weren't previously aware of, and I'll be doing some more of these, so I shall see you then. See you in the next video, and thank you for watching in the meantime.